Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Heinrich Batur. Heinrich Batur was a pilot with the German Luftwaffe during World War II. He didn't know he was going to become a pilot in his early life. He worked as a baker in Austria before the war ravaged Europe. Despite minimal training, Heinrich became an impressive force of nature. It's been estimated he downed nearly 50 enemy aircraft in his first 2 years as a fighter pilot. Then, in 1943, he moved from the war in the East to the Western Front. The Western Front did not offer the same chance of success as battling the Soviets in the East. In Western Europe, the Germans had to contend with the deadly Spitfires, the Mustangs, and the Thunderbolts. Most German fighter pilots didn't survive long, but somehow Heinrich Batur did. He was one of few German pilots who continuously shot down Allied machines on the Western Front. By 1944, Heinrich had supposedly shot down 99 planes. His exact number of kills has never been confirmed, but 99 is the legend. He was about to reach 100 before fate intervened. On December 23, 1944, Heinrich was trying to intercept a raid near Bonn. He came into contact with American P-47 Thunderbolts. He managed to shoot down one of the aircraft, earning his 99th victory, but then he vanished. Heinrich Batur disappeared amidst the dogfight. It was believed the Americans shot him down, but there was never a record of the crash. His plane was never found and remained missing for the next 24 years. In 1968, Heinrich's Messerschmitt fighter plane was discovered buried underneath the ground in the woods. Heinrich was still in the cockpit, totally concealed by several inches of soft earth. His identity was confirmed by the wedding ring inside his glove. It had the name of his wife Marga engraved on its surface. He was later buried in Germany. Today, his legend as an unstoppable fighter pilot lives on. Carlos de Salazar. Carlos Sanchez Ortiz de Salazar was a prestigious doctor in Spain who mysteriously vanished without a trace in 1995. Carlos was only 26 years old when he suddenly stopped showing up to work. He was living in Seville, where supposedly he had a great life. He was a young, successful doctor. His patients liked him. He was described as wise and responsible. His family said that Carlos was destined to be a doctor from the day he was born. Carlos had a degree in both medicine and psychology. He could even speak a handful of different languages. But despite his seemingly happy life and great success, Carlos was reported to suffer from bouts of depression. He would get glum and spend some days in a gloomy state of mind. Then, one day in November, Carlos didn't go to work. His family, worried for his safety, rushed to his home. But Carlos wasn't there. He had left no sign that he was planning to leave. There was no note left behind. There also wasn't any sign of a struggle. The authorities looked high and low for Carlos, but nobody was able to track him down. The case eventually turned cold, and in 2010, Carlos was declared dead. His family was devastated, heartbroken they would never learn the fate of their beloved son. But then, things took a turn. In 2015, he was found alive. 20 long years after Carlos went missing, he was spotted by a couple of mushroom pickers who were roaming through a nature reserve on the northern coast of Tuscany. The mushroom pickers came across a disturbing encampment in the forest that looked like it belonged to a Neanderthal. At the camp was a disheveled hermit who looked like he'd never seen civilization before. The hermit told the mushroom pickers that his name was Carlos, and that he had been living in the nature reserve for 20 years. He even showed them his passport, which they photographed to confirm his identity. Before the mushroom pickers left, Carlos told them he would be long gone by the time the authorities came looking for him. Sure enough, that's exactly what happened. The mushroom pickers contacted a Spanish Missing Persons Association who traced the case back to Carlos. But by the time the police searched the area where he was spotted, he had vanished again. His parents had immediately flown to Italy with hopes of finding their son hiding in the woods, but he was long gone. That was 8 years ago, and Carlos still hasn't been seen again. Rumor has it he is still there in that same nature reserve somewhere, living as a hermit deep in the wilderness. And now for another strange case. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to the Barnes family 1128 and Margaret Slezak for supporting this channel. Thanks, guys! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Petra Pika. Petra Pika made headlines in 1984 when she suddenly went missing. Petra was a 24-year-old computer science student in the German town of Braunschweig. She was on her way to a birthday party for her brother when she vanished into thin air. Germany launched a widespread manhunt, but no trace of her was ever found. Petra was declared officially dead 5 years later in 1989. The police even briefly solved the case when a man confessed to her murder, but that too turned out to be a dead end. There was another disturbing case near Braunschweig being investigated at the same time that Petra vanished in 1984. A man had murdered a local teenage girl and was apprehended by the police. The man who murdered the teen also admitted that he had killed Petra. He would later withdraw his statement, but it was enough to convince local authorities that Petra was dead. But she wasn't. 31 years later, Petra was found living a new life. In the western German city of Dusseldorf, a 55-year-old woman called the police because her house was being burglarized. During the investigation into the burglary, the police needed to know the woman's name. She said her name was Mrs. Schneider, but just saying it wasn't enough. The German police wanted to confirm her name with an official government ID, but the woman couldn't produce one. She eventually broke down and revealed that her real name was Petra Pika. She even gave them her student ID from 30 years ago to prove that she wasn't lying. It turns out that Petra disappeared voluntarily. She fled from her life and family and made it look like a disappearance. She had saved up money and made the arrangements to rent an apartment. The whole thing was premeditated. But why? In the time between then and now, Petra lived in multiple cities throughout Germany. She didn't reach out to any relatives saying that she was alive. She also never got herself a bank account. For 31 years, Petra lived as a shadow person. According to Joachim Grande with the Braunschweig police, she even paid all her bills in cash. Petra's family was elated to learn that she was alive, but Petra didn't want anything to do with them. She refused to meet with them even after so many years apart. When asked what her motivation was to disappear, Petra refused to explain herself to the officers. Since she didn't technically commit any crime by using falsified documents or lying to anyone, there was no criminal offense for her to be charged with. The only thing Petra had to do was officially register herself as alive with the German authorities. Petra's relatives wrote a letter and gave it to the police in hopes they would deliver it to their rediscovered loved one. But Petra didn't want anything to do with them. Some have speculated she may have been brainwashed by a secret Cold War agency in the 1980s. She might be a spy or a secret agent. Then again, she might just enjoy living in solitude. Why do you think Petra did what she did? Let me know in the comments below. Captain William Howard Hughes. On June 6, 2018, William Howard Hughes Jr. got a knock on his door. It was special agents from the U.S. Air Force. William was being arrested for desertion. He had disappeared from the Air Force 35 years earlier. At the time he was arrested, he wasn't even William Howard Hughes anymore. He had changed his name to Barry O'Byrne. William's life is a bizarre jigsaw puzzle. It was in 1983 that he suddenly went missing. It was such a big deal at the time that all the big government agencies were hunting for him. The Air Force was looking for him since he was a deserter. The FBI was also trying to track him, along with the international authority Interpol. Since his disappearance was during the Cold War, it was believed he may have defected to the side of the Soviets. There were also rumors that he had been involved in the devastating Challenger accident when the space shuttle exploded in January 1986. But let's go back to the beginning. William Hughes was born in Seattle in 1950. His father worked in the airline industry, and William had 3 sisters. In his early 20s, William started his career in the Air Force. He enlisted in 1973 and was soon captain at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque. It was in New Mexico that William gained access to secret information. He was working closely on a NATO program that controlled missiles. He was deeply involved with missile launches and missile warning systems. William purchased a house in Albuquerque near the base. There, he lived a solitary and quiet existence. In July 1983, the government sent him to the Netherlands on a secret mission. It had something to do with missile technology. He was supposed to be back at the Kirtland Air Force Base by August 1st, but he never returned. William was a very important person with some very sensitive information in his head. The Air Force launched an immediate investigation to find him. They discovered that William had been withdrawing money from ATMs in Albuquerque before his trip. Before the month was out, he had at least $28,000 in cash, which was enough to start a new life in the 1980s. His car was found at the Albuquerque International Airport. On August 10, 1983, he was considered AWOL. William Hughes was never officially accused of being a spy, but he was declared a deserter. His sister spoke to the press, saying there was no way her brother could possibly work for the Russians. But this was at the height of the Cold War, and paranoia was very high. It was the absolute worst time to desert the Air Force with top-secret knowledge. In 1986, journalist Tad Zulch with the New York Times, the same journalist who broke the story on the Bay of Pigs in 1961, suggested that William Howard Hughes sabotaged the Challenger space shuttle. Tad Zulch said he had sources within the Pentagon who claimed that William was working for the Russians to sabotage American and French launches. By the end of the Cold War, the story and the man were forgotten. Then, at the beginning of summer 2018, special agents with the U.S. Department of State traveled to Daly City to investigate passport fraud. They interviewed Barry Timothy O'Byrne, aka William Howard Hughes Jr. After 35 years, the supposed secret agent was found living with his wife in a small two-bedroom townhouse a few miles from San Francisco. William was sentenced to 45 days in a military prison. 2 months after his true identity was revealed, his wife filed for a marriage annulment. When asked why he disappeared, William said he'd gotten depressed. In 1983, he changed his identity and moved to California because he was tired of working for the Air Force. It was never proven that William defected to Russia, nor that he was involved in a suspicious string of failed missile launches. Where William is now, nobody knows. Natasha Ryan vanished in Australia in 1998 when she was just 14 years old. She was a troubled teenager who had gone missing a few times in the past. She had a knack for running away, so her parents didn't immediately think her disappearance was cause for concern. It was August, and they figured she would return home soon enough. But then, she didn't. In the weeks and months after Natasha went missing, other women and young girls began to go missing as well. Police realized there was a serial killer on the loose. They suspected Natasha had become a victim of Australian maniac Leonard Fraser. 3 women between the ages of 19 and 39 went missing while Natasha was away from home. So too did a young girl of only 9. These were all later confirmed to be the victims of Leonard. Police psychologists described him as a classical psychopath. He had been already convicted of brutal crimes against women but was released from prison. Immediately upon his release, he went right back to attacking women. On April 22, 1999, he killed Petra Pika after following her from school. In the 22 years before the brutal murder, Leonard has spent 20 of those years behind bars. When police raided Leonard's apartment, they discovered trophies from his victims: ponytails cut from the heads of women and other nefarious items. He was subsequently arrested. Leonard confessed to 5 murders, including the murder of Natasha Ryan. The other victims were Beverly Lego, Sylvia Benedetti, Petra Pika, and Julie Turner. In 2001, Natasha's family held a memorial service for her. It was Natasha's 17th birthday, and her family was devastated. They believed their daughter had been the victim of one of the worst serial killers in Australian history. But then, during the trial in April 2003, a prosecutor in the case suddenly announced a bombshell. The courtroom was stunned to learn that Natasha Ryan was still alive. For the past 5 years, she had been hiding in a cupboard. In her early teens, Natasha started experimenting with drugs. She was dating a man in his early 20s named Scott Black. In July 1998, she ran away while walking the family dog. The police later found her at an outdoor music festival. She had been living in a hotel room with Scott. Scott was charged with abduction, but the charges were dropped. The next month, Natasha ran away again. For the 5 years she was gone, Natasha lived with Scott Black in his home only minutes away from her parents' house. Scott worked at a dairy factory as a milkman, and nobody knew he had been harboring the girl everyone thought was murdered. Whenever somebody came over, Natasha climbed into the cupboard and waited. She spent 5 full years inside the house because she was afraid to go out and get caught. The only time she went outside was to occasionally visit the beach late at night. It's unclear what made Scott turn her in, but that was what happened. Scott phoned a children's helpline to tell them that a man was about to go on trial for the murder of a girl who was living in his home. It was as if he felt bad for Leonard Fraser, not wanting him to be blamed for a murder he didn't commit. On April 10, 2003, the police discovered Natasha Ryan in the bedroom cupboard of Scott's house. She was deathly pale from years without any exposure to sunlight. The events that followed Natasha's reappearance were dramatic. She had to go to court court and testified that she had, in fact, not been murdered, which was a spectacle. Her boyfriend, Scott, was sentenced to a year in prison for lying to the police. Natasha was found guilty of creating a false police investigation. She was ordered to pay a total of $20,000 between investigation costs and her own fines. But Natasha ended up getting rich. She sold her story to an Australian production for $120,000. When she and Scott got married in 2008, they sold the news of their marriage to Women's Day for another $200,000. Last anyone heard, Natasha and Scott are still together and have 3 kids. Crystal Hagg. Cynthia Hagg remained in the same house for 20 years. She refused to move because she knew in her heart that someday her daughter would walk through the front door again. Her daughter, Crystal Hagg, disappeared in 1997. Crystal was 14 years old, described by friends and family as a bubbly teenager. On April 26, Cynthia was at work at the local grocery store. Crystal came by to purchase some milk and cereal. Cynthia would always remember how Crystal was smiling as she paid for her goods and left. But when Cynthia got home that night, Crystal wasn't anywhere to be seen. For the next 2 decades, Cynthia Hagg waited for her missing child to return home. Cynthia was stuck in the past. She stopped celebrating Christmas and fell into a deep and relentless depression. In 2010, Baltimore police admitted every effort to locate Crystal had been exhausted. The case was going to be closed because there wasn't anything else the police could do. Unbeknownst to Cynthia, Crystal was living her best life. Crystal had hung out with her friends until midnight on that fateful April day in 1997. Then she got on a bus. Crystal took the bus from Baltimore to New York and changed her name to Crystal Saunders. She got a fake driver's license and worked in the Bronx as a house cleaner. She went from 14 to 23 thanks to the fake license. Soon she was pregnant. Then she was pregnant again. Crystal would have 4 kids by the time she was 31. She learned how to speak fluent Spanish and integrated into her new community. All the while, Crystal was keeping tabs on her old family. She was spying on her mom through Facebook. This means that she was very much aware of her mother's 20 years of heartbreak and could have fixed it with a single keystroke, but she didn't. Not until her oldest child, Brian, born in the year that Crystal fled, convinced her to reach out. On a random day in March 2018, Crystal reached out to her older sister Bianca, who then phoned their mother. Soon, Crystal and Cynthia were face to face again. That was when Crystal revealed her reason for vanishing 20 years before. Crystal said that one of the neighbors had been abusing her since she was 9 years old. The reason Crystal never told her mother was because she thought her mother was in on it. That was the devastating reason why Crystal became a phantom for 20 years. Thanks for watching. Can you imagine fleeing your life and becoming another person? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and come back soon for more shocking videos. See you next time. Bye!